Are you idolizing fear? Hmm. Whether you know or you don't know, this episode is for you. We're going to define some key terms to bring about clarity and understanding, highlight some scripture related to this topic, and discuss what we can do to get rid of this issue of idolizing fear. So welcome to this conversation, Unwrapping Courage, a gift for your soul this season. If you've been following along with this series, thank you for joining me yet again. If you're new, my name is Jelisa Dallas, and I help individuals and organizations cultivate courage. And I do this by way of helping them break barriers to their success, bolster their beliefs for greater confidence, and build courageous behavior to optimize their life so that they can find true belonging internally and externally in community. So thank you for joining me. I am super excited that you are here. So I would love for you to go ahead and get our complimentary resource so that you can follow along on this journey with me on this 25 days of soul work. And again, before we get started, I would love for you to like, comment, share, and subscribe so that other folks who need this information can have it. So again, thank you for joining me. Let's go ahead and get right into it. And as you know, I love to start off with clarity, understanding, and setting a foundation with definitions. So let's define fear and idolatry. So fear, according to the more traditional Google search, if you will, is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. Idolatry is the worship of idols. It's extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. So I like to take it to scripture to kind of even clarify this context or these terms rather more specifically. So scripture talks about idolatry in Exodus 23-5. And this is talking about exclusive loyalty to God. 1 John 5:21, the examination of the heart. Psalms 115, 4-8, foolishness of worshiping idols. Habakkuk 2:18, the value and power of idols. And then 1 Corinthians 10, the entire chapter about idolatry before and after Christ. So I want you to take into consideration that at the culmination of these scriptures, and I'm sure there are so much more as it relates to idolatry, the consequence of idolatry is that we become more of what we worship. So let that kind of marinate for you for a second. Now, when it comes to scriptures about fear, 1 John 4:18 talks about fear as punishment. Proverbs 29:25 talks about the trap of fear. Proverbs 12:25, the weight of fear. And one of our favorites, I'm sure, is 2 Timothy 1:7, a gift that's given from the enemy. That's what fear is. So again, of all of these scriptures that we've just gone over, one of the ones that I know is very popular, the one I just shared, 2 Timothy 1:7, is likely more of our favorites and more what we refer to when we're talking about fear. So I want to read it verbatim. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Now, this stands out because in the text are opportunities to reconsider the influence of fear. So two things I want you to consider are both content, meaning the words and the message itself, and then the context, the situation by which these words and messages are surrounding. So when I read scripture, I read the verse in a minimum of 3 different translations, and then review the origin, meaning like where did the word come from, of the word through a resource called Eastward. So I encourage you at minimum to review multiple translations, as this will provide depth in the meaning being conveyed and overall understanding. So for example, the word fear is also reflected as shy and cowardice, while the word self-discipline is reflected as a sound mind, sensible, self-control, and self-restraint. I also want to call out the context. So here, Paul is encouraging Timothy, the youngest pastor in the New Testament to be bold in his gifts. So let's get back to defining the text. We've already learned about fear, so let's get a little bit more clarity about the opportunities that will dismantle the influence of fear. And again, I'm using general definitions that you can just do a Google search. And I encourage you to go in depth in scripture for these particular words I'm going to share. So the first one, love, deep affection, plain and simple. Again, general definition, deep affection. Power, the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as a faculty or quality. And then self-discipline, the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weaknesses, the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon it. So again, I encourage you to dig a little deeper and identify scriptures that are connected to these terms for even greater understanding on what God has given us. Again, that love, power, and self-discipline. So before I give you ways to embrace the latter part of 2 Timothy 1:7, the love, power, and self-discipline, and return the feedback back to the owner, which, hint, hint, is the enemy, I want to review a few questions for you to consider and to ponder on, and I would love for you to share your feedback of these questions in the comments. So here's the first question. If God has not given us a spirit of fear, who is the source of this fear? And why are we receiving it? Yeah, you might have to take a deep breath after a few of these questions. But again, if God has not given us a spirit of fear, who is the source of this fear and why are we receiving it? Now, the answer may be very obvious, but this latter part of the question is why are we receiving it has a lot to do with what lies we have accepted and allowed to float in and about our lives. So take a moment to respond to that question. The next question is, what gift is the enemy trying to keep you from discovering, developing, and demonstrating? Whew, that's another breather, because the enemy knows us in ways that detour us from getting to our next, that prevent us from progressing. So of course, in our pathway, he's going to put those things that stagnate us and keep us stuck. So again, what gift is the enemy trying to keep us from discovering, developing, and demonstrating? And so in my book, Soul Work, Disrupt Self-Sabotage, Renew Your Mind, and Transform Your Life, I talk about several different gifts. And I mentioned that actually in the very first episode of this series, I talked about our God-given gifts. And it makes you wonder, what of these gifts is the enemy trying to keep you, again, from discovering, developing, and demonstrating? And so here's the last question. I'm not sure if you noticed, but God gives us 3 times the resources, again, power, love, and discipline, to supersede the intentions of the enemy. So the question, what does this say about our capacity to overcome fear? We have a lot to work with. Let's just say that. So go ahead, ponder over this, and let me know your responses in the comments. So now, as we wrap up today's conversations, I want to give you 3 things that you can do to return fear specifically back to the center. Number 1, recognize God is with you. A lot of times we forget that God is ever present. And so Isaiah 41:10 and Joshua 1:9 reiterates this fact. Number 2, release fear from your life. This is reflected in James 4:7. And then number 3, receive the power, love, and self-discipline that God gives us at the latter part of 2 Timothy 1:7. So I hope that this was helpful to you in identifying fear in your life, whether or not you're idolizing it, and what to do to change it. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone you know. And until next time, let your soul work be your best work to a better you. Later.